Motorists have exactly 2 weeks to renew their driver's licenses. Yesterday, Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula extended the deadline at the 11th hour. Over 1 million drivers have renewed or have still not renewed their licenses. Mbalula says more staff have been brought in to address the sluggish pace of renewals. Lawrence Venkile is Minister Mbalula's spokesperson. He joins us now live. Lawrence, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. So we're saying over 1 million licenses still have to be renewed. What's the exact figure?
Let me clarify, Shahan. There's applications that are already in the system that are being printed. However, we have 1,424,756 driving licenses that have expired, that have not been renewed, which means these are people who have not come forward to renew their licenses. The backlog that we have in the system in terms of the cards that have to be printed stands at 522,839. We've printed to date more than 600,000 cards. That is why the minister has been appealing to motorists, please come forward and renew your licenses, because if you renew before the expiry of your card, the receipt that you get gives you a window of 3 months breathing space before you can be penalized for driving with an expired driving license.
Get you. All right. So let's start with the backlog then. So 522,000 currently being processed. Why is it taking so long for that to happen?
Remember, we had challenges later in the year last year, which relates to the printing machine. But now the machine is in production, and the DLCA is working 24 hours round the clock to produce these cards. And we are assured that they would be able to increase the capacity to even up to 600,000 of printing cards each month. But in addition to that, the minister and the MECs and SALGA met a couple of days ago and have agreed to a number of measures, which include extending operating hours for DLTCs, where people can walk in and renew their licenses. But also in addition to that, we will also allow walk-ins. Remember, one of the challenges have been people who were struggling with the online booking, which has now since been revamped. In March alone, we have had 74,000 online bookings in Gauteng, which has the highest number of the backlogs. We appeal to people. There are slots. We had 24,000 slots that were not utilized in the last month. But also, people must not hold back because they cannot book online. They would be able to walk in. But also, each province would be able to extend working hours for the DLTCs, so that motorists can be able to have the opportunity to renew their licenses.
Yeah. So, some people will argue that this process is a pain in the butt, because you first have to book online, then you get a slot, then you have to wait in long lines to actually renew your license. So there's 1.5 million people who are currently driving without a license that is valid because it has been expired. What happens with them after this 2-week period?
Remember, Shahan, what I was saying is that if they lodge an application, the receipt that they get in terms of the road traffic regulations, it gives them a breathing space of 3 months before they can be prosecuted. However, you must also remember that as the state of disaster comes to an end, the draft regulations that were published give the driving licensing directions that the minister has published a further 30 days from the end of the state of disaster. And we are hoping that will also give a further alleviation to the DLCA to process those driving licenses. Because we're working on a system of first in, first out, those who are the oldest in the system would have been processed by now. We expect that the bulk of the applications would come in now. It's beginning of April, which would mean that they have a further 3 months while they are waiting for their driving licenses. And we do believe that the measures that we have put in place would not put motorists on the wrong side of the law for a fault or a fault not of their own. The measures would enable the processing of the backlog, and only those who have deliberately not renewed their licenses would find themselves penalized.
Yeah, but now what happens if you're struggling with the 522,000 backlog in the system? What happens when you have 1.5 million people trying to come forward in the next 2 weeks to renew their driver's licenses? How are you going to handle that, and how long is it going to take for you to actually print those cards?
Look, this is precisely why I was saying there's also an additional window of opportunity, without saying it's not an additional extension. That would be provided by the regulations that will come out after the closing date of today from the Minister of COGTA in terms of what additional breathing space we have beyond the end of the lockdown. But our estimation is that to be able to process those driving licenses, because the machine currently produces at 400,000 a month, and if we are able to push it further to go to 600,000 in the next 4 months, we should be able to clear that backlog. But we will make the minister will make the announcements as he will, and his counterparts will be monitoring the progress in relation to clearing the backlog and the number of people who come forward to apply to renew their licenses.
Okay, it's going to be a very interesting situation. And is there a possibility, because I know the minister said this the last time, that there will be no extension. And I'm guessing his tough words back then was him trying to actually push people to go and apply for a new driver's license. But that clearly didn't work if you have 1.5 million people who haven't come forward. Are you going to have to extend this again? Is that an option?
Look, we do not want people to rely on a possibility of extension, but also remember the directions that allow the minister to provide a grace period are in terms of the Disaster Management Act. And once a state of disaster is no more, the directions will fall away. However, I did indicate that there's a window that the Minister of COGTA, in terms of the draft regulations that would be applicable post the state of disaster, which may provide us with a reprieve of a further 30 days. Currently, the draft regulations say 30 days post the end of the disaster. So that is not a further extension, but that's a reprieve that will be provided by what is it that is permissible to be extended beyond the state of the lockdown. Because these directions have been issued under the Disaster Management Act, not in terms of the Road Traffic Act, because we would not be in a position to do so under the Road Traffic Act. So that is the window of opportunity that we have. However, we are not putting reliance on that. We're putting reliance on augmenting the capacity for the DLCA to produce cards at a faster pace, but also the DLTCs being able to process the applications for renewals much quicker by opening for longer hours, including Saturdays and Sundays right across the country. But also the online services have since the addressing of the glitches that have been there, has performed quite well in terms of the number of people who have applied and paid for the service online before going to a DLTC. That reduces the amount of time they spend at the DLTC and the number of queues they have to stand in. So we encourage motorists to come forward and apply, and government will ensure that no one is penalized for a fault for something that is not a fault of their own, as long as they have actually applied to renew the expired driving license.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. That was Lawrence Vinkelia, Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula's spokesperson.